Welcome to Thrive and Shine Beyond Belief, the podcast that is targeting professionals, leaders, entrepreneurs, business owners. And it's all about, well, maybe unlocking some of the limiting beliefs that might be there, or potentially the self-doubt or the burnout, or maybe something is stopping you from moving forwards. And today we have the lovely Mandy Anderson on us. And what she's going to be doing is sharing some of the challenges and experience that she's had along the way, which is now how she is now helping others to resolve the challenges that she was experiencing and providing tips and guidance on how, well, there is another way, that there is possibility, that there is hope. And we don't have to be the person we are now. We can be the person that we want to become and improve our relationships, our professional lives, the growth of our businesses, and make an impact and a ripple effect around the world. Because at the end of the day, we're all limitless. And without further ado, I'd love to introduce the lovely Mandy Anderson, and she's going to be sharing her journey. So welcome, Mandy.
Hi, Keely. Thank you for that fantastic introduction. It's so lovely to see you, and it's so lovely to be here on your podcast. So thank you.
That's all right. It's an absolute pleasure. Now, I know that you've got quite a journey and wow, what was it, 37 years of experience working in both the private and public sector, and also some of the challenges that, interestingly, you was made redundant exactly the same year as me. Good old 2020. It's got a lot to answer for. So, yeah. And, you know, in those moments, life-changing moments when you've been in environments for such a long time, it's like your safety net. It's almost been like your identity. And then suddenly it's switched off overnight and it has such a massive impact. Now, I'm curious, is that when you started to recognize that things weren't quite right?
For me, as a person,
Yeah.
I think I'd realized it many years before as far as my self-doubt and my limiting beliefs were concerned. But it was definitely a pivotal point for me because that was the point where my self-esteem felt like it was the lowest. Because although it was COVID, and that's why a lot of people were getting made redundant, mine wasn't because of COVID. Mine was because 2 years earlier, the actual college I worked in had been taken over for financial reasons by another one. And they came in and changed everything, and they already had people doing those roles. And so I'd already changed some of the roles, and then they reorganized everything. And the job they had, I couldn't really go for. And you're right, in the sense that my identity was there because I've been doing that all my life. But I also knew that I didn't want to go back to it because very much in that place, we weren't really allowed to have our own ideas, our own empowerment. I mean, they thought they were, and they were quite trying to be really good. But I wanted to do something where I was in control and I was like in charge because I've been in management positions and I wanted it for me to take control of my life. And I just didn't want to go back to all the stress that was around the jobs that I was doing. And also the job I was doing was being mostly done by that company in the area. It was very specialized in further education colleges. So there was only a few I could go to anyway. And so I was very upset to start with, and I started thinking, okay, what can I do? Because I had the redundancy money.
Yeah. So I can see quite a few parallels there, and it's interesting that we do recognise in the past that, you know, you've had those little voices and the self-doubt and the limiting beliefs, but it has those moments, those catalytic moments that suddenly you wake up and it makes you realise that actually you don't want to be where you are right now. Mine probably took about a year and a half after, although I hit the burnout in the 2020 because I thought it was the redundancy and that was all the challenges, but it wasn't. It was all of the past. And as you turn around and say, that it wasn't about COVID, it was the organisational changes that were taking place. And yet the roles that you was being presented with weren't connecting with you.
Yes.
It's really interesting how you suddenly go, this doesn't feel right. But it takes redundancy to make that push. And do you believe if you hadn't had that redundancy that you potentially wouldn't be doing what you're doing right now?
Yeah, 100%. Because it lets you step back from where you are and reconsider things and
Mm-hmm.
reconsider your life. What I started going into is not what I've ended up doing right now. So it took me a couple of years to really find where I felt very comfortable. And that was because of other things that happened in my life. But I think, yes, I would probably still have carried on doing that if I hadn't been made redundant. So I'm quite grateful for being made redundant now, which is, you might feel the same, oh, if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be here
Yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah. And you're right. I had actually accepted the redundancy was going to happen in December, which is why I'd actually booked a holiday to Canada because it was my 50th birthday year that year. It's a great year, which obviously didn't happen. But I'd accepted that. It was more about how it was managed, which disrupted me the most, which is why I suppose I was in that state of confusion when I didn't get the role that I got. But I think, like you, it took quite a while to realize what it was that I truly wanted, and I would have used it as a safety net. And I think that's the challenge that many individuals have when they're in a role and they've been in there for a long time in a company where they know who they are, they know their identity, they know their strengths. So it is like a safety net. It's a regular salary. It's you're getting the regular holidays. You know you've got a pension and all those things. So taking a risk to step away from that is huge, even if you know that you need to. So it is interesting that we potentially, we don't see it at the time, but when it does actually happen, it's a bonus. And that's why it's always, as hard as it might be for others to actually recognize that, see it as an opportunity, see it as a chance for change, seeing it as a chance to take a step back and making those changes in your lives.
Yeah.
So tell me, you mentioned about some of the self-doubt and the limiting beliefs that you experience. I mean, tell me a little bit about your story, which has got to you to the point you're at right now.
Well, basically, it does go back to childhood, as other things do seem to. And it wasn't I had a bad childhood. It's just that it wasn't a very loving childhood.
Mm-hmm.
So my parents met my needs, as in physically, clothes, food, and all of that lot. We were short of money sometimes, but the big thing were that they were the war generation. They'd been evacuated when they were younger from London because they were living in the London area when they were children. And I think that really affected them in the sense they didn't really know how to show love.
Mm-hmm.
And they probably hadn't from their family, because it's that generational thing where you don't do that, or children should be seen, not heard.
Mm-hmm.
So there wasn't much love. There wasn't much, my emotional needs weren't really met. And what children do is they can't process it at that age. So they tend to make it mean something about themselves. And so what we make it mean is we're not good enough, we're unworthy, we're not important. And then you go to, your brain looks for that as you're getting older and older. So that's what it did. So then as I went through my teenage years and ongoing, every time I did something wrong, I would blame it on myself and make it about myself. And I got into relationships in my 20s and that with people who weren't really the best. It was going back into these emotionally unavailable. When you're younger, you don't see it in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So you went with different people, but they were validating me. I needed external validation. This went on throughout my whole life until I met somebody in 2001 and I got married. But we weren't really suited. We got married. You tend to fall into relationships. I find people tend to fall into relationships when you haven't really got that much self-worth. You look at somebody and if they like you and you like them enough and you have that chemistry, you think, okay, I like this person, but you haven't checked what the values are and whether they're the same as yours. And I didn't even know boundaries and standards and all these things even existed. So I wasn't even checking for those. And we got divorced quite quickly after about 4 years, but it also happened to be that I was pregnant. And it had been something we were arranging to do as well. But there's a long story behind that I won't go into. But anyway, so we split up when I was 7 months pregnant and divorced about 2 years later, I think it came through. And so I brought my son up mostly on my own. And I did that for the 18 years. He was going to his dad's house every other weekend sort of thing, like people do, but not from a very young age. And so it's quite difficult. And in the end, after a couple of relationships where, again, I got very hurt, at that point I shut down. And I was I wasn't so bad at work, because what I found was that I had more confidence in the business world.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still not in myself, but you can hide that sometimes. So in my business or in work, I was doing okay in my career. I was working in the private sector, then I left and I started going into more the public sector. And that gave me a lot of confidence as well in my business. So, but I had a lot of work to do outside of work hours. And anyway, that, as we say, went forward until I got made redundant. And then once I got made redundant, I actually started looking into Amazon FBA, because that started coming up on something I was looking at. You wouldn't believe what there is behind the system for Amazon. There's so much to do. But it wasn't really where I wanted to be. It just, and COVID made it probably unviable anyway, with everything being in the wrong place. And so I looked at reporting. But at this time, I was also going through, I'd come out of this, I've shut down from relationships, and now my son was much, much older. Now I'm going into, I need to get back out there. I went back and repeated all the same patterns I'd repeated all the time. And this was my pivotal moment. So I went back out there, I'm thinking, why am I doing this? I could see that because I picked somebody unemotional who shouldn't have been on the dating site and all of this. And I was repeating everything I had done. And I went deep dive into what it was. I could have walked away and just shut down again, or looked at what was happening. And I decided to look at what was happening, and I deep dived everything. Went to see a counsellor, and I got introduced to something called attachment theory. And it just changed everything for me. It made so much sense of the things, because I've been reading books all my life, but we now have the internet, we have different things, and it just made so much sense. And they made me see myself in a different way. I learned about everything that I hadn't, the standards and everything else. And I just felt this real drive inside of me to help other women to find things out sooner, because I turned 60 this year. And it's like, if I'd have known this at 40 or 50, especially 50, things would have changed so much earlier for me. And I want to make sure that other women don't have to go through that themselves, because there's so many things we don't know, we're not aware of. And so that's where I am now. I'm now trained as an integrated attachment theory coach. I've got a program which takes everything that I felt I learned and needed to get to where I am and put it into that program.
Well, thank you for sharing. I'm intrigued, actually. Can you, for those that don't know what it is, what is attachment theory?
Yeah, attachment theory first came about in the 1950s, 60s with Mary Ainsworth and John Bowlby, and they were doing sort of research into how different children react when the mother leaves the room and comes back, etc. And that was the foundation of it. But as things move through time, it developed into something called attachment styles, and there's 4 different attachment styles. And in theory, everybody has one of these styles. And one of those styles is called secure. So we have people in the, that are secure because of how the interactions they had with their primary caregiver when they were younger. And the secure person had all the needs that was required at that time were met. And so they know how to regulate their emotions. They know what it is to have a healthy relationship. They just do it through instinct. They know how to communicate. But only 50% of the population are secure. The other ones fall into either anxious-preoccupied, dismissive-avoidant, or fearful-avoidant, which is mostly called disorganized. And because of how the dating sites work and dating works, the people that are in the dating sites are the anxious-preoccupied and dismissive-avoidant, who trigger each other completely. And that's really a nutshell what attachment theory and attachment styles are. It's your rules for love. It's how you see, well, the expectations you have of another person, and how you perceive your rules are for love. And so the anxious preoccupied might be playing Monopoly rules, and the dismissive avoidant is playing Cluedo. So you're going to get issues because you're doing different rules.
Okay, all right. So, I mean, how does that actually impact, I suppose, the relationships you've got, because of these different styles that are there? How do each one sort of impact each other?
Well, the anxious preoccupied person has a great fear of abandonment and definitely needs more validation externally. So they're looking outside themselves for this validation. And they also tend to give their needs up in relationships. Well, most of the needs they don't know about, but they give themselves up in relationships, and they tend to people please all the time. They don't want to rock the boat, because if they do, it might end the relationship. And so if they get together with a dismissive avoidant, at the beginning it's okay, because a dismissive avoidant is somebody who's really frightened of being trapped or suffocated, whose emotional needs were not met at all when they were a child, whereas the anxious preoccupied was just inconsistent. And a bit like what I was saying earlier, but the dismissive avoidant has completely shut down their emotions. They were told, don't cry, you don't do that, quite a lot of neglect in their childhood. So when they're living with their fears and their feelings. So when it's at the beginning of a relationship, they want a relationship, they like this person, but then their fears start getting attached, because they've got this fear about the relationship, about commitment, about not like being hurt, but just being trapped. And so what happens is they pull away. The anxious avoidant now feels that they're being abandoned in their head, because that's what the subconscious zone is thinking, and starts to chase, which pushes that person away even more. And then if they stop chasing, which generally we don't, that person's fears will come down, their feelings will come back up, and it'll start all over again. And it gets into this cycle. And the other two will go, fearful-avoidant doesn't come up so often. So I'll put that one to the side for now. Does that make any sense? I mean,
yeah, no, it does. What I'm intrigued about, because obviously this is about obviously relationships in a partnership, whether it's marriage or just, excuse me, got a bit of a sore throat. How does this actually relate when you're talking about people within business or in employment, whatever it may be, in a professional setting? I'm sure this has the same, impact. How do you see that?
You can have different attachment styles in your intimate relationships, to family relationships, to work relationships, because we do tend to put on this mask when we go to work and be a slightly different person. But the foundations behind it will still be there. They'll just react in a slightly different way within the offices. So you will still have dismissive avoidance who may not be quite as talkative, but the anxious person will still show things when, if the boss says they've got a meeting coming up, most people would just say, yeah, it's a meeting. But the anxious preoccupied would be thinking, what do they want? What's the meeting about? Am I going to be fired? All this rumination and overthinking in their minds. And so that it does feed into the workplace. You probably wouldn't get somebody who's anxious preoccupied in a relationship being dismissive in a workplace, but it won't be, there's not so many triggers within a workplace, so therefore it doesn't get activated so much as it would in a romantic relationship, because that's where all the triggers are, where they do something, like I said, they pull away, that is what activates it.
I mean, the only reason I was thinking that, because actually the rationale that you just gave, and quite often one of the things I often find when I'm speaking with my clients is that they overthink situations, like you're saying. So one, preparedness for a meeting. I mean, they're perfectionists like you wouldn't believe, because they want to have it on point, because they want that external validation from others. And then when they're in the meeting, because they don't have a voice, because they think that if I speak up, I'm going to be judged, and all those kind of things, those things show up, which then means that after the meetings, when they're going away, they're playing that, like, the conversation over. They're playing the meetings, they're playing discussions over that they've had with individuals throughout that day, which means that they're not enjoying the journey home, they're not being present, they're getting stressed out and anxious, which then has an impact on their sleep, because they're playing that over and over again. And tell me how I know. I used to be that person. So I was all of the above there. But interestingly, nearly all of my clients play the same patterns. And although, you're saying that on a personal level, this is more about the love relationship you have with each other and yourself, it has such a significant impact on your professional lives too, doesn't it? So
Yeah, especially for the anxious preoccupied, because like you say, there's so much rumination in there, and you play it back and you say, why did I say that? Why didn't I say this? I could have said that. I could have done this. And you
mm,
can't do anything about it because it's gone now.
mm,
But your mind isn't. It's basically playing it over. Exactly what you said. Yes, that I did have that.
yeah. And even with work colleagues and girlfriends, boyfriends, friends, I mean, the biggest thing I used to do all the time was play back conversations and then was worried that I'd said something to offend or upset. So I would be the person that always went in and I would apologise the day after, a couple of days. In fact, there was one guy that I used to work with, it was almost like a running joke with him, is even though categorically he was wrong, because I didn't like conflict, because I don't like anger, and I'd play back the conversation we had, and because it had ended up with us having a spat, the next morning, without fail, 9 o'clock, I used to ring up and I'd say, apologise. And he'd say, and he'd laugh at his peers. I knew he used to do it. I'd say, here we go, 3, 2, 1, because he'd see me and I'd pick up the phone and apologise. So it was almost like he was doing it deliberately. And it used to play on me so much because I was worried about what somebody else think. And then quite often you go back to a person, you apologise to them, not necessarily him because he did it for fun, but others, they go, don't even remember, they're
Yes.
so focused on themselves,
Yes.
they don't even care what you said. It's that they haven't even heard that you said something. So it's ridiculous,
Yes.
isn't
That's
it? The
right. Other
patterns.
people, yeah. Other people are too busy living their lives. They really don't notice you. And we think that they do, and that they, yeah, and they think that we're not, we're not good enough or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting what you said, though, because within integrated attachment theory, you also learn a bit more about codependency.
Mm,
There's quite a lot of codependency there where you you really don't want to upset anybody, but you worry when you have, because you can't be your true self because you're losing who you are sometimes, not necessarily yourself, but
mm,
if I go into relationships, you don't want to rock the boat. And even in work, I suppose, yeah, true, you don't want to rock the boat, but you don't also know who you are
mm.
because you've given yourself up so much time. You can't be as authentic as you'd like to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, wearing that mask, the mask of a people pleaser, recovering. Um,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
interestingly, the words you actually say there is what I share in my own story, is that, the people pleaser, the one with the fear of conflict, don't want to rock the boat, want to keep everybody else happy, the entertainer, making everybody laugh, making everybody joke, because when everybody's happy,
yeah.
everything's good. When
Yes.
they're not happy, they're unpredictable. So it is really interesting how you are playing exactly the same words as I literally say when I share my story.
Yeah, and you need them to be predictable because you need it to be safe.
Yeah,
And if they're not predictable or unpredictable, you don't feel safe.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So one of the things we do in integrated attachment theory, which is basically taking all those attachment styles, but it's integrating it with the subconscious mind. And one of the areas that we deal with is limiting beliefs and the what's behind it, which could be I am unsafe.
Hmm.
But it actually, so Thais Gibson put this all together, and she runs a personal development school. But it's brilliant because you go through core wounds, you go through needs, you go through emotions, you go through boundaries, communication, and beliefs. 6 different areas. Sorry, not beliefs, behaviors.
Hmm.
And you work with somebody on all of those areas because those are all areas that affect all the different styles. And then within that, you can look at codependency, parentification, all other things. And that's why I trained as integrated attachment theory coach, because I so love the thing about attachment theory and how it just opens your eyes to everything.
Mm.
But then it's so much deeper than that, because it's okay, so this is the style, what do they do with their needs? I used to think needs were things like you have a need for somebody not to leave the washing up on the side or not to leave their underpants on the floor, and it's not that at all. It goes back to the 6 human needs of Tony
Mm.
Robbins. And then within that you get these other needs that call personality needs within integrated attachment, and they feed into those. But in the end, we're all looking for security or safety, comfort,
Mm.
love and connection, etc.
Yeah.
And so it's just and how we communicate how you communicate with an anxious preoccupied as opposed to dismissive avoidant is so fundamentally different. Because if you say something to a dismissive avoidant and you just ask them to do something, they think it's going to be, what, now? How much? How long? Are we going to make me do this all the time? Is it going to distract me? You know, and all you want them to do is take the rubbish out. You know?
It's really funny that you should say that. So, Dean's mum, like, I mean, she's passed away now, but her house was like a show home. And I mean, she was one of these people that, I mean, if someone had worn a shoe in the living room, she'd go, "Who's worn a shoe?" You know, their shoes in it, because the carpet would be sort of off kilter. Like,
oh my God.
And you know, when it come to if we was eating dinner, and she'd say, "Are you going to wash up?" And it's like, "I'm still eating dinner," kind of thing. So with my husband, because he's plays that in his head, when I say, "When you've got a moment, can you?" he still hears in his head, "Do it now."
Yes.
And I'm like, you know, he'll say, "Well, I can't do it right now." I said, "Well, I didn't ask you to do it right now. I said, when you have a moment, can you do this?" And there's only one thing that I say that I want done by a certain time, and that's a kitchen clear by 4:30. By the way, he's at home, he's medically retired, so he's got sort of time to do that 4:30 thing. So when I come downstairs, it's clear for me to be able to start cooking dinner. Otherwise, dinner doesn't get cooked. It's simple. So, but that's the only time I have a time barrier on it. But because I know of this mindset that he's got from with his mum, I don't give an order, never give an order. It's, can you, when you have a moment, because I know that is a real issue for him, but he still plays it back no matter how many times. And I'm like, I didn't say that.
Yeah, we're conditioned
Yeah.
all through our lives and the things in childhood because
Yeah.
that's what we've heard, and so we've made them mean that. Yeah, definitely. That's so interesting, isn't it? Yeah, really is.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what we have to be so mindful of. And you know, this is where the whole compassion comes into it as well, is having compassion for someone else, because we don't know what's playing, what story is playing inside their head.
Yes.
When you say something to someone, you don't know what you're triggering with that person. And I know it's something that's hard to learn, but when you start coming from a space of compassion and understanding, and you don't have to agree,
Yeah.
but understanding, well, where's this coming from? Why are they behaving in this manner? And, you know, having the space to understand from their perspective as well. You know, it's not black and white, and we don't all have the right answers. And, you know, what's right for them is right for them, you know, so on and so forth. You know, they're the things that, you know, that are so important. And I'm curious, is how does that play out, you know, in the models and modems that you teach others?
I suppose that really comes out in the communication styles. So we learn very much what each different attachment style, what their communication style is. And as you get more and more used to attachment styles, you can pick out most of the time what you think is the attachment style. But you're not going around labeling everybody that you see,
No.
but you just can't help it sometimes, can you, when you see it? And it's about making it, because when we, like in a marriage, you need to have the team. You need to be a team. You need to be able to, even though, you know, we say, oh, we're looking for validation externally, it doesn't mean that you can't have that validation in relationship, to the point of, yes, I understand you have an issue with this, and I hear you, I see you. What do we need to do to resolve it? And to be able to go to somebody and know that you can say to them, these are the issues I've got, or I'm upset about this, or you said that. And it's about being, and it will come back to our needs again, a need for something that we have. And it's about expressing that need. And anxious preoccupied and fearful avoidance are not good at expressing their needs. We tend to go around, and especially fearful avoidance, and we just go red flag, red flag, red flag, keep it, and then we don't do anything about it. And then one thing will happen, it's like you explode, and it's like, well, everything comes out, and it's just that one thing, but you've been collecting all these things all the way along. So it's definitely compassion, and it's we never really got taught communication between couples. Like I said, we fall together sometimes, and that person's coming in with their Cluedo, which is what they've been taught all the way through their conditioning in their life, and you're coming in with Monopoly, and it's really hard to work it. But if you've got somebody who actually can go work through conflict, that is brilliant. I mean,
Yeah.
that's one of the things that's on my thing. They have to be able to work through conflict,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
otherwise they're not even listening to you. It gets blamed back onto you. They're not validating anything, and they storm off. And that is so hard in a
Mm.
relationship for
Yeah.
that to be happening. And
Well,
yeah,
were you, as you say, you're not communicating, and I mean, one of the things I say, doesn't matter whether it's professionally, personally, in any relationship, conflict is good as long as it's
yes,
constructive
yeah,
conflict and it's in control.
yeah,
So if you do get to a point, say for instance, because what often happens is people will shy away if they fearful of it, or they're avoidance, or they're scared what's going to be happening, and or you'll get the other ones that will go in, on the attack because that's the way that they protect themselves.
yes, yes,
And yet, if you go in with control, so you have that sort of space to take a step back, a breather, and focus and have clarity and have a conversation. But if it gets to a point where maybe either of you are not listening to each other, being able to comfortably turn around and say, look,
yeah,
we need to take a pause. This isn't over. The discussion, hasn't been resolved, but I think it's in our interest to step away for the moment and then come back when both of us have had a chance to breathe. Because the problem is, when we don't do that, things are said that cannot be unsaid. And that's the reality, is that, once you voice something, you
yeah,
can't get it back, and it plays on the mind over and over. And then what happens is that it's then thrown back at you. Oh, well, you said such and such, and you said, so it becomes very personal as opposed to constructive.
yes,
And that's the important thing to do. And as you, Taman, said, is that we're not taught it in relationship, but we're not taught it when we're a child.
no,
So
no,
when we're children, we should be allowed to have conflict, but talk to each other, to be able to recognize it. So, like, when you did that to him, this is how they felt. It's learning to have it and getting them to be able to voice, this is how I felt when you did this to me, to help them to understand the impact that they're having on somebody else, and why they're feeling the way they're feeling. Those conversations, that's not taught, and it's so, so vital, and it should be
yeah.
taught in schools.
I think one of the reasons it's not taught is because if only 50% of the sort of um, if only 50% of people are secure, then teachers don't necessarily know how to teach it either. If they come from a secure, if you come from a secure childhood where they're not arguing, you are actually being modeled
Mm,
conflict, because they can see, oh, if mum and dad have an argument, they get together, they talk about it, then they go away and they resolve it, and everyone's happy again. So they are being taught this because they
mm,
can see it being modeled for them. But when you come out of a household where there's more arguments going on, and there's nothing resolved,
mm,
then you think that the only way conflict is resolved is by either arguing, or you get scared of it because you think it will lead to an argument.
yeah, yeah,
And that's why it's part of my program, is to get across about communication, and it's also about positively framing it at the
mm,
beginning. So I know you've been doing this for me, I really appreciate this,
mm,
however, can we have a look at this, because I feel, and taking it from that and making sure they've got time to have that conversation. But you're
yeah,
dead right, if it gets to that point where it's starting to get angry, because it can do, because you'll be triggering each other slowly if you haven't got all of these tools, then you have to step away and come back to it.
mm,
But then it's making sure you do come back to it.
mm,
And dismissive-avoidant will take longer to come back. The
yeah,
anxious-preoccupied will start being upset that oh dear, I did this, and come back and try and say, I'm really sorry. And this person's going, I'm not ready yet.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
starting to shut myself down. I'm not ready yet. I'm deactivating, and you come
yeah,
back to me later. It's such a minefield. But that's why I found it so amazing,
mm,
because it can do so much for relationships.
yeah, yeah, and
But
save so many relationships as well.
exactly. Yeah.
Save so many. I mean, we see it, now. I mean, the divorce rate is like, through the roof. And by the way, there is nothing wrong with, if there is a relationship that is not healthy and it's not working, then yes, that's okay. But I think quite often it's too easy to walk away from a situation, particularly in the sort of like earlier years, because you see where there's sort of 4 year, 5 years and everything like that. I mean, there's not many relationships now that sort of exceed 20 years, which is very sad. But quite often, for the reasons that you said, is that they've fallen into relationships because they want acceptance, and they love the fact that someone's caring for them, but not necessarily the right person.
Mm.
But many relationships would last the test of time if they sat and had a conversation and discussed that, when you do this, it's not that, the fact that you've gone off and played golf or you haven't done this, is the fact that you're not acknowledging me, and I feel like I'm being unfairly treated or something like that. I mean, it might be, I mean, one of my clients was saying the interesting thing is that, if they'd had a row, he'd bugger off for the evening and like walk out. She's worrying about the whole discussion of everything that's gone on. And then it turns out, like a few days later, they finally talk to each other. He's been off to the pictures. So it's just like, oh no, she'll calm down by the time I come back, So it's like didn't bother him the slightest. It's moved on, passed off, and all those kind of things. But what she wasn't doing is actually sitting down with him and saying, look, it's not the fact that you're doing this or you're going to golf, or it's the fact that you've not considered me after having a really shitty day, long hours. I've come in, there's no dinner, there's no food, no conversation, you've had a drink, you've gone off to your golf, and basically I feel neglected.
Yes.
And that's okay to share that. It's like,
exactly.
Because it's not about what he's done, it's what he's not doing is the issue. So
sometimes we don't know it's the fact that we feel neglected. We think it's because they've gone off to golf and that, and it's knowing that it is how you feel inside, and it's that fact that it's because you feel neglected, and then being able to explain that to them. And then that person hopefully will then do something to help you feel less neglected and recognize it's got to take you into consideration. Then it's sorted, it's resolved, it doesn't lead to resentment in the future. Whereas when it's still left and they can't explain it, then it's just resentment builds. And I mean, my marriage only lasted 4 years, but we didn't have a choice to go to counselling or anything, because he just decided to go and pick someone else. So that's what happens sometimes. They leave. But I can do couples counselling with the integrated attachment theory, and it's exactly that. It's just really helping them to see what's really going on.
Under the surface of what's really going on. And being able to connect with that. And I mean, the interesting thing, as soon as she did have that discussion with him, it was like, oh, right, okay then. So when she then did go away, she came back, the house was clear, there was dinner on the table, and he's continued in that vein. And at the end of it, and I did say to her, I said, well, I do hope you said thank you. She said, yes, I did.
Yes.
Because that's the mistake that's often made, is that they then do what you've asked, but then you don't recognise it and say thank you for it. And at the end of the day, people want to get that acknowledgement, don't they? So it's both ways.
Because also there's no point getting somebody else, like with kids as well, getting them to do something and criticising everything they're doing. Because you have to allow them to do it their way. And as you say, really acknowledge the fact that they've done it, and be very thankful and appreciative of that they've done it.
So a very interesting topic. I know we could probably go on for ages about this. So based on the learnings and experiences that you've had on your journey, I mean, what 3 tips would you give to the audience that could help them in their day-to-day lives?
Depending if it's somebody looking at attachment styles or for the more of the workplace, I think I would say mostly that on the work side, never give up with what you're trying to do. If you feel that you've got like you said earlier, you're never giving up. If you've got that feeling inside of you as an entrepreneur that you've got somebody you can help, keep going, because other people will criticize it and say, why are you doing that for? Why aren't you, just getting a job or doing this, especially if it becomes harder. Yeah. And the reason they say that is because they can't see your dream. It's your dream. You can see it, you can see where you want to be. And a lot of people have a more fixed mindset where they think, well, this is where you are. You can't get there because that's not who you are. But they didn't realize that, yeah, you have to change your identity to get there, but it's doable, it's possible. And by doing that, you're also becoming the best version of who you are. And so it's being able to say, and it comes back to the validation again, if you want validation, it's being able to step out of that into your own self and recognizing that it is your dream. Don't give it up to somebody else. Don't give it up for somebody else. Keep going with it. But there does come a little caveat with that, in that be sensible with things. There were sometimes I wasn't as sensible as I needed to be with certain areas. So you've still got to be mindful of finances and everything else, because sometimes it's not always as easy as we think to get to the end result. But definitely, if you've got this burning desire inside, keep going with it. And also on top of that is, when you do try to change your identity, the subconscious mind is going to turn around to you and say, no, you can't do that, because that's unsafe, that's scary, because it's trying to put some relevance to it and think, what do we do with that? It will look back at everything and it can't find any reference because we haven't done it before. And so as far as it's concerned, it's unsafe. And if it's unsafe, it's a danger to us. And the subconscious mind wants to keep us alive. And so that's why we get so scared when we're trying to do something. What we need to do is just say, because this was really big for me. It was like, why? I really want to do this, but it's sending me over here. Why is it sending me over here? And I had to really dig deep and find out why. And it is just, you feel the fear and do it anyway. The only way you're going to go over it is by actually doing it. But you can do it slowly, exposure work and everything, and get through it. But you will have to step outside your comfort zone to get to the other side. And it's safe. You can get there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the other thing I found, which is down to individuals, is we need to have sort of, it's faith, but it's not faith as in religion. It's faith in a higher power there. Because I found the way to get out of my head when I was always ruminating about everything. I now can see that I have this faith that there's something bigger than me out there, the universe, and it's working for me. It's not working against me. And that if I can believe in that, I don't have to worry about everything. I don't have to be anxious about everything. And it's really got me through last year. And it just gives you so much more comfort in yourself. And sometimes it can be religion. This is more the universe manifesting this sort of idea. But having a faith in something bigger than you that is supporting you and that life is working for you, it's not working against you.
Yeah. It's not happening to you.
It's not happening to you.
Yeah.
Yes. And one little tag on to the end of that is that one thing I did learn a few years ago when I did some program is that, and this is going to sound a bit weird, but all events are neutral. What does that mean? All events are neutral means that until we put a meaning on it, it's neutral. It could be anything. An event has happened. People will see an event in completely different ways. This happened, one person would get completely cut up about it, upset, stressed. This person would just see it in a completely different way because of how they've been brought up. But if we can see that we are adding meaning to everything, question the meaning you're putting onto it, question the story that you're putting onto things. And is that story really true? Because sometimes we are putting this story on, like I say, that the boss, they're going to have a meeting. Is it really a meeting? Are they going to fire me? And it's like, you're putting that meaning onto it. You're putting that story onto it. Question it and say, is it really true? Or is it 100% true? No, it can't be 100% true because we don't know until we get there. So what are other options it could be? And think about those options, because those are the ones that are probably more realistic in the end.
Yeah. So, although I mean, I quite often say is, look, we don't know until we get there.
Yeah.
Until we're in the moment, then there's no point in worrying about it because you're, as you tell me and say, playing a story that doesn't even exist. And I think the best way to associate that is, like say for instance, a friend had organised to go out with you for the evening, and then they cancel on you.
Yeah.
And then you then start going, well, why did they do that? Or maybe they don't like me, or maybe I said something that was wrong, or maybe this and maybe that, and blah, 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 and play all of these things in your head. And then when you then actually have the conversation and say, oh no, I couldn't, like this happened, blah, blah, blah. So,
Yes.
and,
Yes.
and like you've played all of this inside your head and preempted something that doesn't exist. It's not real.
Yes.
It's never going to happen. And it's right like the what ifs, isn't it?
Yes.
The what if this?
Yeah.
What if that? What if you don't?
Exactly.
it's,
And
it's,
you
it's
put that
ridiculous.
meaning on it, and so it just sends you down that spiral.
Yeah,
And it's so hard. It is so hard.
yeah,
It's questioning what you actually say into yourself.
yeah. And
Um,
letting it go. It's like
yes.
the universe is talking to me, and so it's like what it's like. Or the other thing is that I mean that my brother passed away a few years ago, and when a few things happen again and again and again, and I'm like, all right, John, what are you trying to tell me? It's just so like,
Yeah.
obviously, I'm not hearing. So therefore, what is it that you're trying to tell me? And sure as eggs is eggs. Once I do that, then whatever it is that the answers will come, and
Yeah.
it's. I mean, it's not ridiculous because it's for a reason,
Yes.
and it makes you far more open and receiving
Oh God, yes. Yeah.
things. It's just incredible. And as you turned around and said, I mean, I know you've had a tough year, 2 years. It's been a tough time for you. And there are those individuals that would have just given up and gone, sod it. I will go back to my 9 to 5 job and, I'll fit into this bubble and not be me and, not create the vision and the dream that I want to. You could have given up, but you didn't because you knew that what you was doing was the right thing. And what you're doing is creating something magical to serve other individuals to avoid and escape your experience. So
Yes.
and it's
Exactly.
beautiful that it's your time to shine. This is your voice. And at the end of the day, we are all limitless. We have to have the belief
Yes.
to do
Yes,
it.
that we can get there and be Mandy 3.0, the next one coming.
Yeah,
Yes. And yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you.
Uh, that's okay. So I ask this of everybody. If you was going to say something to your 20-year-old self, what advice would you give, Mandy?
The advice I'd like them to have given would have been to say, go and find out about attachment theory, but they probably were still doing it at that time. So it would be along the lines of, you can do this. You are worthy. You are special. And I love you,
Oh,
which is what I've sort of said to my 15-year-old that I've got in my head in this. I brought my 15-year-old to me and my 3-year-old to me, or my 5-year-old. And I'm their parent, but I actually see the 5-year-old and the 15-year-old. So I'd say the same thing probably to that 20-year-old, just give them the validation that they were missing, that they really need, and the love that they would need. And even that would just change their life around. I think, yeah.
beautiful. Thank you. I appreciate you. And it's something we should say to ourselves on a more regular
Yes.
basis, especially I love you, because many individuals don't.
Exactly. We have to love ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how can anybody else love us if we don't
Yeah.
love ourselves? So, and it is
Exactly.
a really important thing. And one more question. If you had a book that you could recommend to our listeners, what would you recommend? Or podcast or something, what would you?
There's so many books that I've read over the last few years. But I think, especially as this is going out to entrepreneurs, I do think that it works for both areas. But I think that Stephen Covey's Seven Habits of Highly Effective People is such a good book. And especially the bit where it's seek to understand and then to be understood. That can work. I keep copying out and giving it to people who've got children and saying, just go look at this and other things, because it works with relationships. And yeah, I just think there's so much in there that you can use just throughout life. So I think that is just a really good book.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. So it is a bit of a challenge, isn't it? Because there are so many books, but it's interesting how one book immediately comes to mind when someone asks you that question. So it's the right book at the right time and in that moment. So
yes.
Well, anyway, Mandy, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. And for those listeners out there, if you found some benefit from this particular episode, then please share it to others. And of course, if you haven't subscribed already, then do that. And if you think there's anybody else that would benefit from some of the other episodes that I've created and shared with others, then go and share it to your friends and make an impact on the world. Because at the end of the day, we're all limitless. Let's open up that door. Let's open up the universe and all become abundant in our lives, no matter what that may be.
Oh, that's
Thank you.
brilliant. Thank you so much.